Thank you.
You want to scoot over a little bit that way? So
Let's see the screen.
Now I might be in the way again because he's moving.
Depends on how far over it is.
1, 2, 3.
That's
Ready?
this one.
Up. Okay. Don't, you're stepping on it. Closer.
I'll be moving back
We
over
can
here.
turn this one on if it's easier. We can turn this one on over here. No, that's fine. Come on, take a walk. Walk, 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 walk. Okay, sit close. Much better. You can see her better now?
Yeah, I could see it.
This isn't on yet. They'll turn this on. Okay? So it's not on yet.
Make sure everybody has paper. Am I in the way?
It's okay. When we Okay. So feel free to fill some out. Okay? Everybody has paper? Anybody else on paper? We're good?
He says that they can switch to the other one now.
Okay.
All right, Ben, the microphone is ready for you, Ben, if you want to start.
Grab the microphone, Ben.
There you go.
I got it. Yes, my friends, I come to you from an era in history where civilization lost its humanity, its heart. A time when there were only three kinds of people in this world. There were the killers, the victims, and the bystanders. We now know that the whole world knew what was happening to the Jewish people, but they chose to be silent, giving Hitler carte blanche to do with them anything he wished. And he did. 6 million of us, 1.5 million of whom were children. And the world was silent. Not a peep. I remember in Auschwitz, bombers were flying over Auschwitz, and we were praying, drop some bombs to the gas chambers, crematorium. They went about a mile away from Auschwitz, and they bombed I don't know.
Factory. A factory of some kind?
Yeah, some factories they bombed, and they turned around, they came right back over Auschwitz, and they saw all these chimneys with smoke, ashes. They just flew up. The whole Holocaust is really a mystery. How could it be possible that human beings could turn ordinary people into monsters, killers? I'll tell you my story, but every time I do, I feel my whole body is shaking. What I went through is unbelievable. Where were people? Where was the world? I had a wonderful family of 7. Pictures. My father, Lazar, yeah, in the corner there. My mother, my little brother, my oldest brother there, my sister Lola, and a picture of Lola, and my sister Goldie on the bottom. Next to Goldie is me, and I was 12 years old. The only picture of me from the war, my little brother Tuli, my sister. Anyway, out of the family of 7, only 2 of us survived. My sister Lola, the one on the corner on top, and I. We were the only survivors. The others were slaughtered by the Nazis. I was about almost 11 years old, not quite, but almost 11 years old, when the buildings that we lived in started to shake. You show the building?
So go on another one.
Yeah. And our 3 windows, the other side of the gate, was a part of our apartment. There was another Jewish couple on this side of the gate, on the bottom floor. Those 2 windows. Was a young couple. They had 2 daughters earlier. I mean, they were younger than I. And the mother gave birth to an infant little boy 2 months earlier. So one early morning, the whole place started shaking and rattle. We ran to the windows, and this is what we saw. Tanks were rolling down the street.
Go back.
Following the tanks, there were half-tracks, and every few steps, a soldier would jump out of the half-track, get on the sidewalk. That's how they occupied the city. There was no fighting. Following them to the Wehrmacht, the foot soldier with their shining blankets and their footsteps was quite impressionable for an 11-year-old kid. Somehow the pictures don't come out right with my story.
We're still, we're good with this, right? We don't have the one with that track, we can't find that one. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
So, as soon as they passed the building, my father called us kids into the dining room. He set us down on chairs. He says, okay, from this moment on, there are no more kids. You're all adults. No back talk, no whining, no obey and listen, which is exactly what happened before overnight. Grew up overnight. 5 days later, it pulled up to the gate, and the Nazis started to bang on the gate. They came running out of the shirt tail hanging out. What's happening? All they want to know is where the Jewish people live. And he was quick to oblige. He showed our apartment and our neighbor's apartment. They came breaking down the door, pistol whipping us. We were still in bed, 5 a.m. In their hands, they had open sacks, and they were yelling, throw in all your valuables, money, gold, silver, anything of value they can find. And they were beating up my father to open up the safe. While my father's trying to open the safe, we hear this terrible screaming from our neighbor's apartment. My sister Lola and I went through the back door, through the kitchen, into the yard, into their kitchen door, and this is what we saw. This monster was holding the infant little boy by its legs and swinging it, and yelling to the parents, make him shut up. The parents and the daughters are yelling, our baby, don't hurt our baby. With a smirk on his face, you can see he was enjoying what he was doing. He smashes the baby's head into a doorpost, killing it instantly. We all jumped on him, but the other soldiers heard something was going on. They came running in and they were a little shocked themselves to see what they saw. And they said, okay, Hans, let's go. So they gathered up all the valuables that they got, threw it in a sack, threw it in the truck and took off. That was the 5th day of occupation. From that day on, things started happening day after day. There was a curfew for Jewish people. You couldn't be on the street after 7 p.m. So between 7 in the morning and 7 p.m., you couldn't be on the street. Jewish people had to wear a Star of David, an armband, from the age of 4 on up. You couldn't travel here, you couldn't travel there. My father's business was wine and syrup. He had a wine and syrup manufacturing. He also had a chocolate factory. He was the first one to manufacture chocolate-covered wafers, like Kit Kat, only the shape of little animals, bears, rabbits, and I had tinfoil on it. Every time my father comes home, us kids will search his pockets. He always made sure to have some goodies in there. One day he goes to the business, wine and syrup. There are guards stationed, and they just chased him away. He went to the chocolate factory, the same thing. They wouldn't even let him go and take his briefcase out. They just chased him away. You couldn't recognize my father when he came home that morning. And things started to happen, one thing after another, new ordinances. You couldn't travel anymore, you couldn't go here, you couldn't go there. A new ordinance came out that the Jewish people may no longer reside in Krakow. If you wanted to live in Krakow, you had to go into a ghetto. I hope you know what a ghetto is. Terrible place. And my father was preparing to go into the ghetto, but they gave us a choice. The only time in history they gave us a choice. If you don't want to go into the ghetto, you can go into a small community around Krakow, but you can't live in the city. So my father is preparing to go into ghetto. His family, numbering maybe over 200, they all went into the ghetto. And while my father is packing, a young man walks up to him by the name of Michael Lieber. And he says to him, Mr. Lesser, you know how I feel about Lola, Dr. Lola. I'm in love with her. Someday I'd love to marry her. But do me a favor, come to the same community that my parents are going and I'm going to move in, called Nepolomice. Well, my father gave him a choice to go into the ghetto or to Nepolomice. He chose Nepolomice. That was miracle one, because all the people who went into the ghetto, a few months later, were put in cattle cars and taken to Belzec. Belzec was an extermination camp, and everyone was killed. So if my father would have gone into the ghetto, I wouldn't be here to tell the story. All right. So now we're loading the wagon, horse and buggy, and Michael Lieber helped us pack, and that's when we found out that my father had 1,000 American dollars that he saved up for a rainy day. He took the money and he pasted it between the pages of a religious book, and he put it in a sack full of other books. He had 2 sacks full. And we're now leaving Krakow. An hour outside the city of Krakow, we're being stopped. Halt! And 2 husky Nazis jump on the wagon. The first thing they wanted to know, do we have any Jewish literature, books? And they saw 2 sacks full of books. They picked them up, heaved it on the side of the road. They had a mountain full of books. You see, anyone who did not go into the ghetto, if they left the city, they had to go through that road. So they were confiscating all these religious books, and they were going to have a bonfire after everybody left. My sister Lola, the one who survived, spoke a beautiful German. She walks up to him and she says, look, my father is a writer. He wrote his autobiography in 1 book. Let him keep this 1 book. Well, maybe he liked the way she spoke German. He says, okay, I'll give you 5 minutes if you can find it. And we all climbed on a mountain of books. They all look alike. They were leather-bound, brown or black. We keep sliding down, and after 5 minutes, he chased us away. My father, penniless, he's going to a new community. We don't know. He doesn't know how he's going to feed the family. Family of 6. Not like in get a job. Jewish people are not allowed to be hired. He's coming into this new, Michael rented out. By the way, those pictures that you see, my sister Lola was an artist. And she made these pictures 5 years after the war, from memory. This is the house that we moved into Niepolomice. Half of the house was the apple orchard farmer. The other half was us. It was just one big room. Between the 2 rooms, there was a baking oven in the hallway. People used to bake their own bread. When Michael heard what happened to my father, that he lost all his money, he brought my father a sack full of flour, 100 pounds of flour, figuring he'll be able to bake bread to feed the family. When my father saw the flour, his face lit up. Instead of baking bread, he started to bake pretzels. Why pretzels? All you need for pretzels is flour, water, and salt. Those ingredients he had. Then he took those pretzels to the neighboring bars, taverns, and offered it for sale. It was a novelty. They started to buy the pretzels. Before they knew it, my father became a little baker in that whole community. He baked mandel bread and cookies and cakes and breads and matzahs, everything. This lasted for about a year. And meanwhile, Michael and Lola get married. At the wedding, there was the wedding guests. Here they are. You see, out of all these people, only 3 of us survived the war. The rest of them were all slaughtered. Michael and Lola and I, you see my picture, I was the 3rd one from the other corner. I was 12 years old at the time, 12 and a half, I don't remember. Just the 3 of us survived. Everybody else, that little boy in the white suit resting against his mother is my little brother and my mother. So, excuse me. When you talk, you need some
Yes.
moisture. Michael and Lola move out of the house and they move into a duplex. You heard me?
Yes.
They move into a duplex. The owner of the duplex happened to be the mayor of Niepolomice. One evening, the mayor comes home from work and he says, Michael, Lola, save yourselves. I heard a rumor there is going to be a raid. against the Jewish people tonight or tomorrow night. Save yourself. And Michael heard that. He went out, he hired a wagon with the driver, a horse and buggy, and we snuck out in the middle of the night. The only place we could go to is the nearest city, which was called Bochnia. Bochnia had a ghetto. That meant we had to go inside the ghetto. Bochnia ghetto had a very bad reputation. What happened? Every so often, 2 or 3 dump trucks would come into the ghetto, and the Nazis would go from house to house, pull out the children from their beds, and throw them into these dump trucks. Of course, the parents were screaming, our children, and the children are screaming for the parents. They filled up these trucks and they started to pull out. The parents were running behind these trucks and screaming for their children. But these cultured people had machine guns at the end of each truck. So they would mow down the parents running behind these kids, behind the trucks. Anyway, we had no choice. We had to go into Bochnia Ghetto. And it's a good thing we did, because that night there was a raid in Neapolomice. And they would go from house to house, pull out the Jewish people, throw them into these trucks, and take them to the forest. In the forest, the men were given shovels, they had to dig a ditch, and everyone was shot. How do we know this? Lola and I survived the war. We went back to Neapolomice to find out what happened to all the Jewish people. And the farmers were telling us, as they were going to the forest, early in the morning, pick mushrooms and berries to sell in the market in the morning, they saw those trucks pull in. They were hiding behind trees, and they saw everything that happened. They said the ground was moving for 3 days afterwards. Such status. Okay. So it's good that we are in Bochnia Ghetto now. The driver unloads us in the middle of the street on the sidewalk, or unloads us, and we're sitting there when Michael sees his school buddy by the name of Farber. He was a Jewish policeman inside the ghetto. They had no weapons. All they had is a baton on the side. Their job was to keep order inside the ghetto. So Farber says, "Michael, what are you doing here?" And Michael tells him the story. Farber says, "Okay, don't worry, Michael, I'll find you places to live." He took them, Michael and his parents and his sister, to one place, and he took my father, my mother, myself, my little brother to another place. It was just one room, and there were 8 other people in that room. Now we were 12. No beds. All they had is straw on the ground, blankets on top of the straw, blankets hanging from the ceiling, separating each family. Everybody in the ghetto had to work. If you didn't work, you didn't receive any rations. You you were dying. I was about 12 and a half, maybe 13 at the time. I worked in a uniform factory. My job was to sew on buttons on uniforms. It was easy work, but it was 12 hours a day, very little sleep and very little food. That lasted about a year and a half. Farber, the friendly Jewish policeman, goes over to Michael and Lola. He says, Michael, Lola, save yourselves. I heard there is going to be a podlava, which means a raid in the ghetto tonight. Ever since those trucks would pull in and pull out the children from the beds, every apartment and every house had a hiding place now. They call those hiding places bunkers. That's when we found out our bunker was this piece of furniture. You opened the door, you spread the clothing apart, the back panel would slide apart, and there was a hole in the wall, and the 12 of us could crawl through and stand between two buildings looking for us. The outside of the buildings were connected, but the ceilings were open and it was snowing, it was cold. And the 12 of us went across. The last person, of course, had to close the door behind him, push the closing back in place, close the back panel, and we stood there all night long shaking and shivering. And we hear shootings, dogs barking. We hear our neighbors are being torn apart by these wild dogs. Towards the morning, it got quiet. When it got quiet, we dared to come out. When we came out, we couldn't believe what our eyes are seeing. People torn apart by these wild dogs laying in the snow. A mother and an infant little boy. The boy was dead, but she was still alive. Laying in the snow, screaming. People going around in push carts and picking up these bodies and pieces of bodies and taking them to the Ghetto Square. In Buchenwald Ghetto Square, they piled them up as high as they could. And these cultured people would come with gasoline cans, pour gasoline over the people, and some of those people were still alive, and started the Buchenwald Ghetto bonfire. A human bonfire. Can you imagine what it was like? I knew that my sister Lola and Michael and his family were hiding in a doghouse. You heard right, a doghouse. As you picked up the floor from the doghouse, there was a step ladder, and 7 people could go down and hide. They had provisions and bedding, everything down below. As they were about to go in, Michael tells the story now. Another Jewish policeman by the name of Schiller, Morris Schiller, walks up to them and he says, Michael, Lola, I know about your hiding place in the doghouse. Unless you take my mother and my sister here along with you, I'm going to tell the authorities. Well, there was only room for 7. Now they were 9. So Michael and Lola walked away. And as they're walking away, this friendly Jewish policeman, Morris Schiller, sees them. I mean, yeah, Morris Schiller. Not Morris Schiller, I'm sorry. Farber. Farber sees them. He says, what are you doing here? Why aren't you hiding someplace? Michael tells him this story about Morris Schiller. So he says, Michael, Lola, don't worry. Where my sister and her 2 children are hiding, there's room for you. Follow me. He takes them to a leather factory. Above the factory, there was a water tank. He says, my sister and her 2 children are inside the water tank. Climb up the ladder. Inside your rope, there's a rope. You lower yourself with a rope. Towards morning, if you hear a certain knock, that means the coast is clear, you can come out. Michael is telling the story now. They lower themselves with a rope and they see his sister is standing knee-deep in water. Little girl waist high in water. And the mother is holding an infant little boy asleep. And they're all shivering and shaking. They were little water rats nibbling at their feet. They can't, terrible. All night long they heard screams, shootings, dogs barking, the same thing we heard. Towards morning it got quiet. When it got quiet, there was that knock on the tank, the coast is clear, and they pulled themselves up. They came down on the step ladder after they put some circulation back into their legs. The first thing they wanted to know is what happened to Michael's parents and the whole family. They came to the doghouse. And this is what they saw. You saw everybody is laying in the snow with a bullet hole in their head. Little Marika in the corner, the 7-year-old sister, Lola made her a doll. She's still holding the doll. Lola saw that she started to scream. And Michael stopped her. Lola, there may still be burning bodies. They're going to hear you. With a quelched cry, they knew what they had to do. See, according to the Jewish religion, you're supposed to bury your loved ones within 12 or 24 hours. So Michael went out with Lola, and they found a rickety wheelbarrow. They put the family on the wheelbarrow and wheeled them to the cemetery, Jewish cemetery. In the cemetery, he found a shovel. He found a shovel, he dug a grave, and he put the family into that grave. Lola, with her bare hands, icy cold dirt, were digging out that grave. When Morris Schiller walks up to them, he says, it wasn't my fault. And it wasn't his fault because his own mother and his sister were also killed. However, he says, that graves that you put your family in, I want it for my mother and my sister. You're going to have to take them out of there. But Lola started to cry. Michael says, he's got the power over us. So they took everybody out of the grave, they put them back on a wheelbarrow, found another spot. While this is going on, they hear a jeep is coming up the hill to the cemetery, and they stop at the gate. Two husky Nazis jump out, yelling, "Morris Schiller, Morris Schiller." And he walks up to them, "Jawohl, here I am, here I am." They pull out the revolver and they shot him. This is what they did to people who have seen too much. They didn't want to leave any witnesses. He must have seen a lot that night. Lola and Michael holding each other, walking down the hill back to their apartment. They hear people going around with microphones yelling. All the Jewish people who are still survived, who are alive, have to go to the union right to register. You have to go to the to the police station to register. The Jewish police station register. If you didn't register, you wouldn't receive any rations. You'll starve. Lola, Michael, and the whole family were going to register when something happened. There's a window, and other side of the window there was an SS man asking questions. Next to the SS man was sitting the head of the Gestapo from Bochnia, the head of Gestapo on a chair, and the Jewish policeman was next to him. Farber was next to him. And he's listening to everything that's going on. When they asked my sister, "Where were you born?" She said, "Munkac." Munkac, where is that? That's now in Hungary. Used to be Czechoslovakia, now it's Hungary. The head of Gestapo heard that. He says, "Stop everything. I want this woman in my office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Well, my sister heard that. She started to cry, and she walked away. And the whole family walked away with her back to her apartment. You couldn't console her. She was screaming and crying. Why would the head of Gestapo ask a good-looking young woman to come to his office? You can just imagine what went through her mind. Well, to tell you the story, what happened from this point on, when my sister went to the Gestapo headquarters the next morning, it's a long story, just to tell you that my sister and my whole family, except my oldest brother, were able to go out of the ghetto, and we took 55 people with us. How that happened is a miracle. It involves the head of Gestapo. He was executed for what he did. Very interesting story, very interesting. I'll tell you a little bit about it. Next morning at 8 a.m., the two Jewish policemen come over to Lola and they say, "Okay, Lola, it's time to go." Well, they left and the whole family followed. And we came to the gate. There were a lot of friends all waiting at the gate. And Lola went across to the other side with 2 policemen to the Gestapo headquarters. And she came into a beautiful home, used to be a Jewish home at one time. And they came in and they see a lot of people with typewriters typing away. At the end of the room there was a table. Behind the table is the head of Gestapo by the name of Schönbrück. Lola, shaking, comes in with the policeman. And he saw them come in, he stood up behind the desk and he pulls up a chair for Lola to sit down. That was out of character, because if a Jewish person walked on the sidewalk in a German approach, you had to get off the sidewalk, pull off your hat, go around him. And here the head of Gestapo is standing up and pulling up a chair for a Jewish woman. And he sees she's shaking and crying. He says, calm down. No one is gonna hurt you here. Sit down. Were you really born in Munkac? She says, again, yes. And he says to her, you are one lucky young woman. She was wearing the Star of David on her arm, and she was shivering. He pulls down the Star of David. He says, you are a Hungarian citizen. Germany has no quarrel with Hungary, so we have no jurisdiction over you because you're Hungarian. You don't have to wear the Star of David. You don't even have to live in the ghetto. And she heard that. She couldn't believe what she thought just heard. Excuse me. She couldn't believe it.
Then you have about 40 minutes left, okay?
What?
40 minutes.
Left?
Yeah, because we won't have time for questions.
Okay. All right, so now they asked her, where was the whole family born? They asked her, where was your family born? Of course, everybody was born in Munkac. That wasn't true. Only her mother, my mother was born in Munkac and she. But the rest of the family were born in Poland, Krakow. He has his secretaries take the names and they made out certificates, papers for each member of the family that we are Hungarian citizens. You don't have to wear the Star of David. You don't even have to live in the ghetto. And when she came back and we were all waiting for her, and we see she's coming back with a smile on her face, we expected the worst. Her clothes were not tattered. She comes back. What's going on? So she tells the story. Well, among with us, there was a rabbi, a friend of ours, a very well-known rabbi, and he picks up Lola and he dances with her. He says, Lola, you are the Queen Esther, modern day Queen Esther. Queen Esther was a story about when the Jewish people lost the war with the Romans, and the Jewish people were running into other different countries. I guess that's how my parents wound up in Krakow. In Serbia, there was a Jewish queen. Her name was Esther. The king fell in love with her, and she was Jewish. He fell in love with her. Anyway, that's a whole story in itself. If you know the Bible, you probably see the story where Haman, who was a big shot in that country. Anyway, he came out with an ordinance to kill all the Jewish people. Even then, he didn't like that they all ran into this country, Serbia, and he was going to kill them all. Queen Esther's nephew heard that. He came to the palace and he found the queen. He told her the story, and she asked the king, would he please stop the ordinance? She says, what kind of ordinance is that? Who ordered that? So she said, Haman. Anyway, the long story is they hung Haman and all his family for what they were about to do to the Jewish people. So Queen Esther was she was helping the Jewish people. So now when the rabbi picks up Lola, he says, you're like Queen Esther, the modern day Queen Esther. You're helping the Jewish people get out of the ghetto. He saw something could be done, and that is falsify those papers for other Jewish people to get out of the ghetto. He says, I work in the Judenrat, I have a typewriter, I have clean sheets of papers. All we need is somebody with a stamp from Schönbrück, and they found a person with a rubber ball. They took the rubber ball and they duplicated Schönbrück's stamp. All they needed now is somebody to false his signature. My oldest brother, he volunteered. So the end was, they found out, and meanwhile, 55 people with our family are outside the ghetto already. They found out, and they arrested my brother. They put him into a concentration camp, and they took Schönbrück, the head of Gestapo, and they executed him. There was no difference, according to the Nazis, whether you're Hungarian or Polish, you're Jew. No difference. So they executed him. This is the story. When he picked up my sister and danced with her, he meant you're like a Queen Esther, you're gonna save some people. Because he foresaw what could be done, falsifying these documents. And many people are still alive. If they're still alive today, I don't know. But they were alive after the war because they were able to get out of the ghetto. Outside the ghetto, Michael befriends a truck driver who was hauling coal. So he says, we'll pay you a lot of money if you can take the truck, convert it into double-decker, coal on top, and between the coal and the chassis, people could hide, and you would take him to the Czech border, Polish-Czech border. We'll have a smuggler waiting there. We'll pay you a lot of money if you do it. And he agreed. He agreed. And he did just that. He made the truck. And the first group of people went 10 people, 5 and 5, like sardines in there. My sister Lola and Michael went first with 8 other people. Why did they go first? Because you couldn't trust these drivers. They would take your money up front and then turn you into the Gestapo, and they get paid ransom money for Jewish people escaping, right? So we had a password. When the driver comes back with the right password, you can trust them. So they went first. 2 days later, the driver comes back with the right password. So it was time for another 10 people. 5 and 5. 8 from that family and 2 from our family. The next transport, there'll be my father and mother coming. Remember, my oldest sister is in Munkacs, Hungary, with her grandparents from my mother's side. So she is a good free woman. Hungary is still independent. So it was, my father insisted that I and my little brother go next. I remember going into this truck. My God, we were like sardines. I'm facing my brother, and the truck starts to move. An hour outside the city of Buchenwald, we stopped, halt, and through the cracks we can see soldiers with rifles all around the truck. We don't know what they're talking to the driver. The roar of the engine was too loud. And then the truck started to move again. Moving, we figured, oh, they must be taking us somewhere to be shot. And we see there was a soldier standing on the step near the driver. Now we hear soldiers are walking on top of the coal, and the coal dust is filtering through. My little brother is about to sneeze, and I'm holding his nose and his mouth. 2 hours they were with us traveling. And then we figured this is it. And all of a sudden we hear, Dankeschön, Dankeschön. They were only hitchhiking. They had no idea there were 10 Jewish people hiding under their feet. Talk about miracles. There was one miracle after another. Now, he unloads us in the forest, and there was a smuggler waiting for us in a tool shed, and we went into the tool shed in the forest. There was the smuggler waiting for us. He took us in the middle of the yard, the middle of the forest, and he tells us to lay down on our stomach and look up. We lay down and we look up, and we see soldiers walking with rifles and dogs, and we see barbed wire. Just quietly lay here. At 3 a.m., those soldiers will come down, and they will meet fresh soldiers. When the fresh soldiers, they have a little ceremony between them. During that ceremony, it's about 5 minutes before the fresh soldiers come up. You can cross the border quietly. And about 3 a.m., we saw they're coming down. When they're out of sight, We shimmied our way up to the barbed wire. The smuggler picked up the barbed wire and told us to cross, but be very careful. At the end of the mountain, if you tumble, it's a big mountain. If you tumble or fall, it's all over. They're gonna hear you. He says, sit down at the edge of the mountain, holding hands, and slide down quietly, which is what we did. We slid down quietly. I asked my little brother, are you all right? He says, yes. When somebody taps me on my shoulder, I jump out of my skin. Who in the middle of nowhere, pitch black? He says, Binish. No one said Binish to me, called me Binish, except my immediate family. He says, I'm your Uncle Belo, your mother's brother. What are you doing here in the middle of nowhere? How did you? He says, when Lola and Michael went through 2 days earlier, they contacted us, and I came here waiting for you. I'll take you across the border from Czechoslovakia to Hungary. That's another story. I don't have the time to tell you that. I'm getting signals there. So,
30 minutes.
Yeah. Anyway, we crossed the border and we're now in Budapest, Hungary. In Budapest, we meet Michael and Lola that were waiting for us. We go out, we have a meal. We had to do something I hated. I had to go into the police station to get legalized. So they put me in a jail with my little brother. My uncle went up to upstairs, signed some papers. He is going to be our guardian. And we were still underage. So we became legal in Hungary. And after they released us, we went to a train station, we boarded the train. We're now going to Munkac. Munkac is where my older sister is waiting. My grandparents, my uncles, my cousins, the whole family is waiting there from my mother's side. In the morning we arrived there, all very happy to see us. Excuse me, I need a little wetness. All right. How much time?
About 30 minutes.
Okay, so now we're in Munkac. The whole family, a reunion, it's beautiful. We meet, and I tell everybody what's happening in Poland. Most of them didn't believe, but my family believed us. And they said, well, this will never happen in Hungary because Hungary is an ally of Germany. Why would Germany siphon off the soldiers to occupy a friendly country? And it didn't make sense. But the whole thing didn't make sense about Hitler. I waited 1 more, 2 months, 3 months, and my father and mother are supposed to come across. They didn't. Finally, a man came across who knew my father and mother. He told us what happened. As they were about to go in the truck, a farmer in one of those houses saw what was happening. He called police, the SS, and they came, they pulled everybody out of the truck, lined them up against the wall, including the driver, and all 11 people were shot. This is what we found out. About 3 months later, the Nazis come into Hungary like they were invited guests. I told my uncle, I says, now that the Nazis are coming in, it would make a lot of sense if you converted some of your valuables into diamonds. Diamonds you can hide on you. And he listened to me. One day he comes home with boxes full of shoes, and a beautiful pair of black shoes for every member of the family, and he told us, knows that in the heels of the shoes there are diamonds. Use it only in a life-threatening situation. He gave us all these shoes. Now, when the Nazis came into Hungary, they knew every Jewish person, where they're living, their businesses, their education. How? There were no computers in those days. IBM had punch cards, and they would sell these punch cards to anyone who would pay the price. IBM doesn't deny it, but they say they had no idea for what purpose they're going to use it. And they told us Jewish people, Germany needs workers. You'll all be relocated to Germany. Able-bodied men and women will be working, children will be schooled, older people will be cared for. Bring along all your valuables with you, but that you can carry, but leave everything else behind. Anyone found hiding will be shot. And the Hungarian people believed it. I believed it too, but I didn't know about killing camps, extermination camps. I didn't know any of it. Maybe because my parents might have known, but they didn't tell us kids. So everybody packs a bundle, and we're now being led to the railroad station. At the railroad station, we see cattle cars lined up all over the place. And people carrying bundles and valises and everybody. And while I'm waiting to go into the cattle car, two men with a stretcher walk up with the lady in the stretcher. They set it down by my feet. I didn't recognize this woman, bloody black and blue. But I took a good look at my sister Goldie. I says, Goldie, what happened to you? She says she tried to escape. She went as far as the railroad station. A Hungarian gendarme who went to school with her recognized her. He turned her into the SS. They beat her to a pulp. Now they order us to go into this cattle car, 82 cattle car. Perhaps wouldn't be so bad if it were not with the bundles and valises. It was so tight that if you wanted to sit down, someone else had to stand up. And they had 2 buckets of water in the corner. Once the water was gone, there were no sanitary facilities, no toilets. 80 people. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. You can just imagine people started to use those buckets, and those buckets were filling up now, and they were overspilling all over the floor was human waste. On the third night, we arrived at a place called Auschwitz. Auschwitz is Polish for Auschwitz. And we see a gate. On top of the gate it says, Arbeit macht frei. Labor gives you freedom. Those are the gates of Auschwitz. But we don't know about it. In Auschwitz, we don't know about Auschwitz. The train stood there for 2 hours, and then it started to move again. And it went another 3 kilometers down the hill, and it stopped at a place called Birkenau. Birkenau was part of Auschwitz. Birkenau was, most of the killing was done in Birkenau. But we don't know any of this. The train arrives, it was still nighttime. They opened up the gate and they screamed, all different languages, leave all your belongings on the floor. Don't you pick anything up. Women and children to the right, men to the left. I was 15 and a half. You can say I was a child, or I could be a man. Instead of going with my sister, my little brother, I went with my uncle, my cousin, as a man, figuring, my reasoning was, if this is a labor camp, they want you to labor. And if you labor, I figured they're gonna feed you better. That's the only reason. It was a great miracle, because had I gone with my sister, my little brother, I wouldn't be here to tell the story. Anyway, we're moving forward the line, and we see a doctor in a white rug, white gloves, and he's going like this, right, left, directing people to go right or left. Every once in a while he would question somebody. When I came close enough to him, that was Dr. Mengele. I didn't know that. He looks like a doctor. He was the angel of death. He decided who should live or die with a click of a finger. So he asked a young man, kannst du 5 kilometers laufen? Can you run 5 kilometers? And he, or would you rather go by truck? He says, I'd rather go by truck, I have a bad knee. Poor soul, not realizing that meant certain death. But who knew? He sent him to the right. I tell my uncle, my cousin, he just testing us to see if we're strong enough to work. I see the barracks here. Why would he ask, can you run 5.5 kilometers? Didn't make sense. So I tell my cousin and my uncle, let me go first. Whatever he asks you, tell him you're strong, you're healthy, you can run, whatever. Let me go first. So I'm 15 and a half, and I walk up to him, stretch myself out tiptoe, salute him before he has a chance to ask me anything. And I say, 18 Jahre alt, gesund und arbeitsfähig. I'm 18 years old, I'm healthy, and I can work. So he asked me, kannst du 5 kilometers laufen? I said, jawohl, I can run 5 kilometers. He sent me to the left. My uncle, my cousin also went to the left. And now they took us into a big auditorium like this. And they ordered us to get undressed, get out of your shoes, and walk over to the line of barbers. They're going to cut your hair, and then you walk into the showers. Picture this. I have diamonds in my shoes, and I wasn't going to release them. My uncle who gave me those shoes with the diamonds, he got out of his shoes. His son, my cousin, got out of his shoes. I refused. Now picture this, naked, but beautiful black shoes, walking over to the line of barbers. They're cutting your hair all over your body, and they're not exactly gentle the way they cut it. Nobody says anything about my shoes. The Nazi guards, the soldiers, were walking back and forth and looking at me, looking at everybody. It's like God blinded their eyes. They don't say anything. And I walk into the showers with my shoes on. They gave us other shoes, wooden soles with canvas on top, the striped clothes. And I took my shoes under my arms, under my jacket, and they're now leading us out to the barracks. And we are coming to a barrack. It was still a little nighttime. The Stubenmeltester, the man in charge of the barrack, comes out and speaks to us in a broken German. I can detect that he is a Polish inmate. He's in charge of the barrack. He says to us, "Ha, you Hungarian Jews, you think you're here on vacation? Think again. You see those chimneys, those ashes flying? Those are your mothers, your fathers, your brothers, and your sisters. And if you don't behave and do exactly what you're told, this is how you're going to wind up. Ashes." I couldn't believe. This is the 20th century. My sister, my little brother, ashes. And they chased us in the barrack. In the barrack we took, my uncle, my cousin, and I took an upper bunk. We lay down. We were so tired, we fell asleep immediately. We fell asleep. Now we're sleeping. An hour later, my cousin wakes me up. "Ben, get up, get up. What's happening?" He says, "Listen." And I hear a chanting, a crying, or singing. Couldn't make it out. Then he says, look. One side of the barrack, there was a board missing in the wall, and we see a flame, flying flames. "What is it?" I said, "I don't know, but I'll find out." You see, the Stubenmeltester, the man in charge of the barrack, I could detect he was a Polish inmate, and his accent. So I spoke Polish. I came with the Hungarian, but I'm from Poland. So I went over to him and I said, "Przepraszam bardzo, excuse me, sir, can you tell me what these noises are and what we see that flame?" He says, "You Hungarian Jews, you know nothing. 3 months before Hungary was ever occupied by the Germans, we in Auschwitz knew that Hungary is going to be occupied because they made us dig fiery pits, 3 fiery pits, because they knew when the trains will start coming in with the Hungarian Jews, there'll be no time to go through the regular process and sent him to a crematorium. The crematorium could not burn fast enough, all these people coming in. 3 fiery pits. And one of those fiery pits was behind our second barrack. There's one barrack between us and the fiery pit. And we hear the screaming all that. I didn't believe him. And he was telling me all kind of other things. I didn't believe him. And I made a big mistake. I went out to check myself if this is a fiery pit. If people are now alive, I couldn't believe it. So I went there, behind our barrack, behind the other barrack, and I stood there and I saw 3 trucks full of people surrounding that pit, and they were throwing in people alive. I saw one guy pick up a little girl, she had a skirt on, and throws her into a fiery pit, screaming. That was my mistake, because I can't get the picture out of my mind. Day and night, I see it. I said, where was God? Is there a God? Can he allow children to be thrown in alive? Anyway, this is another story. I'll tell you how my belief in God came back. But right now, what we went through in Auschwitz, he told us other story. He told us how long it takes to kill a person in a gas chamber. He says a half hour. But they didn't have a half hour because these trains were lining up full of people. After 15 minutes, everybody was laying on the ground. They opened the doors, aired it out for 15 minutes, and the zombie commando would come in, pull out these bodies, cut their hair, pull out their gold teeth, check their body all over, and put them on gurneys, 5 on a gurney with a rope, and send them to the crematorium. But that was too slow of a process now, because of this lineup of people. Now they were throwing in these half-dead people into the trucks. And on top of these trucks, they were throwing in live Jewish people, children.
15 minutes. 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Anyway, I made a mistake. I found out all these things. And what we went through in Auschwitz is unbelievable. I can't even begin to tell you. Every morning we had to stand naked in front of the guards, and they would count you, and they would look you over. If you're too skinny, they pulled you out and sent you to the gas chamber. Every morning you didn't know if you will survive this or not. For 2 weeks, after 2 weeks, they put us in trucks, and they took us to a labor camp called Dachau. Dachau was a rock quarry. As they dynamited the mountain, boulders would come down. It was arched out with sledgehammers to break them into manageable pieces, throw it into mining carts, run it down the hill to grinding machines to make gravel out of it, and pull those carts back up. Oh, back-breaking work. I didn't think my uncle is going to survive this, so I bribed the kitchen chef with my diamond and my shoes to give a job to my uncle in the kitchen. He took the diamonds he did give my uncle a job in the kitchen. So it got a little easier on us because my uncle could eat in the kitchen and then he would take his ration and share it with his son and me. So now, excuse me, we work every day very hard. When we come in at night to the camp, we had to line up rows of 5. Even the kitchen help had to come out and line up with us in rows of 5. And after everyone was counted, they would dismiss us. We would go for our ration and go on to barrack. This one evening we come back from work and they count us, they count us, and they count us. And the commandant comes down with his Fräulein, his girlfriend. He says, I'm going to show these Schweinhund a lesson they'll never forget. I'll teach these pig dogs a lesson they'll never forget. What happened? 3 inmates escaped. And because of this, he orders his henchmen to pull out every 10th person in line to receive 25 lashes. As they're counting every 10th person in line, my uncle was in front of me and I felt he's going to be a 5 or a 10. I pushed him behind me and I took his place. I became one of the 10s. And they told us to go in the middle yard. They brought down bundles of hardwood stakes, 1 by 1 inch, 2.5 feet long. And they brought down a sawhorse. I hope you all know what a sawhorse. Yeah, sawhorse. And this is what they order us to do. Tiptoe in front of the sawhorse, bend over where your stomach cannot touch the 2x4. One man would hold your trousers and the other one would hit, and you have to count out loud. If you miscount, you start from 1 again. If the heels touch the ground, you start from 1 again. If your stomach touches the 2x4, you start from 1 again. It was almost impossible. I was number 4. There were 3 men ahead of me. The first one goes up. They pull the trousers, the other one starts to hit. He starts to yell, eins, zwei, drei. And every time they hit him, you see a line of blood coming through the trousers. Finally, he miscounted. He touched the ground again and again. He falls. When he falls, the commandant goes over, kicks him in the face. Get up. He couldn't. He pulls out a revolver and shoots him right in the temple. They push him aside. His girlfriend walks over to him, gives him a hug and a kiss, like he just performed a heroic act. He killed the man. Number 2 went up. The same way, the heels touched it, and the stomach, and again and again and again, he finally falls. The commandant goes over, kicks him in the face, get up. He couldn't. He pulls out the revolver, shoots him. We have 2 dead bodies. I am number 4. There's one more man before me, and he was a little younger. He also miscounted, and my God, he couldn't stay. He was shaking. He would stay on his heels. Anyway, stay on his toes. His heel can't touch the ground. He falls. No, he didn't fall yet, but he yells out, "Please have mercy on me. Don't kill me. Let me live." So the commandant says then, "Stand up, come over here and face me." The poor guy stands up, makes 5 steps. His knees gave out from under him. He falls. The minute he falls, he comes down, kicks him in the face, get up. He couldn't. He shoots him. So we have 3 dead bodies, and Ben Lesser is next in line. Talk about miracles. I remember walking up to that sawhorse, tiptoeing, bending over, and I said to myself, okay, Ben, this is it. In under 5 minutes, you want to live, you better do exactly what you're told. I remember walking up, tiptoeing, bending over without touching. One man is pulling my trousers and then start to hit, and I yell out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Finally, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, I screamed out, 25, I made it. You could hear a pin drop in that whole camp. No one believed that anyone could survive it. I didn't believe it either. The man who was holding my trousers tells me in Yiddish, go over and thank him. I stand up, blood is running down my legs. I walk over to him, I salute. Danke schön, Herr Kommandant. Thank you very much, Herr Kommandant. When he hears that, he puts his hand on my shirt collar, twists me around, facing the number 10s who are still to be beaten. He says, now I told you it could be done. If you do it like this, Junge, you have nothing to worry about. While this is going on, there's a commotion at the gate. They caught those 3 inmates. When the commandant saw that, just like a child gets sick of a toy and throws it away, he told all of us number 10 to go back in line. And he orders his henchmen to bring down a portable gallows. And we all had to stand there and watch while they were hanging, each one of them separately. I'll never forget the 3rd one. They put the noose around him. He was a little younger. He screamed out, Shema Yisrael. It's a Jewish prayer. Only 6 words. When they heard it, they kicked the stool out from under him. They wouldn't let him complete the last 2 words. And after the words, they dismissed us like nothing ever happened. We went to our rations and went to the barrack. For weeks, I could not lay on my back because of these belts. I had to lay on my stomach. One night, we heard cannon fire, something like the front was closing in. We went to work that morning. There was a loudspeaker. No one is working today. The camp is being evacuated. Line up in rows of 5 and walk out of the gate of the camp. I'm next to my cousin, and my uncle was already in the kitchen working. We couldn't say goodbye to him. We never saw him again. And we start to march out. That was called a death march, because if you could not keep up pace with the soldiers, they simply shot you. So in my book, you're gonna see that I write, I was walking in the death march 3 or 4 weeks. Recently, we had a German professor contact my daughter, Gail. He says, you know, I read your father's book. I loved it so much. He asked permission to translate it in German, and anyway, they even, anyway. Yeah. However, he says, your dad made 2 mistakes in this book. What are the mistakes? One, he says he marched in the death march 2 or 3 weeks, or 4 weeks. Mr. Lesser was 7 weeks, 456 kilometers from Dachau to Buchenwald, and he knows. I don't know how I was able to survive this. All I can remember is the last week my shoes fell apart, and now I was walking barefooted over snow for a whole week. And if you didn't keep up pace with the soldiers, they shot you. How I survived. My cousin begged me, please let me sit down, I can't take it anymore. I wouldn't let him. I says, no, we will both survive this war. Closer than later, please. And I dragged them along on my arm. We finally arrived in Buchenwald. In Buchenwald, they counted us. They told us to go in the barrack. They're going to feed you. You're going to take a shower. And you can sleep there. But tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. come back because Buchenwald is also being evacuated. So we did that, and they fed us, and we took a shower. I am in the shower with all these men, and I have a picture of that. I don't think, yeah, there's a picture of me in the shower. Don't ask who took that picture. It had to be a Nazi soldier or somebody. Anyway, that's a whole story separate. But let me just tell you that after we were fed and they gave us fresh clothes, we came down, and Buchenwald is also being evacuated. They line us up in rows of 5 and we march out. About 300 yards of the camp, we see cattle cars lined up. They count us 82 cattle cars, and they ordered us to go in. I helped my cousin to go in, and I said to him, please find a spot against the wall so we can rest our back. I remember going to Auschwitz and people all around you. It was terrible. He did. He found a spot against the wall and saved a spot for me. They closed the doors, 80 people. An hour later, they opened up the doors and they threw in 80 loaves of bread. A loaf of bread for each person. Picture this. Those people who were next to the door were grabbing 4 or 5 breads. Those of us against the wall had nothing. I don't know where we're going for how long. I needed bread. I start climbing over the sitting inmate to get to the door and wrestle out the bread from somebody who had many. While I'm climbing, somebody had a pocket knife and they stabbed me. I feel a stab in my mouth is filling up with blood. I can't stop, I have to get a bread. So I climb, I keep climbing. This guy had a bunch of breads. I pulled one away, he kicked me. I put it in my back pocket. I come back to my cousin. He says, Ben, what's happening to me, bleeding? I put my finger here, it went right through the tongue. To this day I have a mark here because when I was skinny it was in the middle of my throat. Now that I filled out, the mark is over my shin bone. Anyway, I had one bread between my cousin and I keep it in my back pocket. At midnight, every midnight, I give him a piece the size of a half an egg. I had enough willpower to control this. It lasted 2 weeks. If anyone knew I had bread, they would have killed me for it. Everybody is dying. Dead people all around me. And we arrived After 2 weeks, the bread was gone. Another week, no bread, no water. We arrive at a place called Dachau. Dachau, they tell us to go out of go through the tracks into the gate of Dachau. In Dachau, you see that train there, you see it? Anyway, and I went out with my cousin, and out of the 80 of us, only 4 walked out. 4 of us walked out. My cousin and I and 2 other people. Everybody else, 76 people dead in that kettle car. From the whole train, this professor was telling me the second mistake I made. I say in the train there were 3,000 people. He says there were 7,000, 6,900 some people. He knew, and out of the 7,000 people, only 18 of us walked out in Dachau alive. Today, I'm the only survivor left. I've been the only survivor left in the last 7 years. My friends, please, if you have any questions, now is the time. I'll try to answer it.
So, we passed out paper. So I'll come around. And Ben, do you want to talk about just the very, very end, how you were liberated? Because you didn't talk about that.
But,
How you were liberated and what happened to you after, like in the, and how you,
okay.
okay, oh, just a little bit, so they know.
3 days later, Dachau's liberated. And I see they're yelling, befreien, befreien, liberation, Americans, Americans. I said to my cousin, let's go out and take a look what's happening. And we shimmy our way outside and we see the inmates are crawling on their hands and knees and kissing the boots of the American GI. They look like gods to us. They liberated us. I tell my cousin, let's walk out. We walk out 2 steps. 2 GIs walk up to us. One of them had a can of Spam, and he opens up the can of Spam. It smelled so good. We made a mistake. We ate some of it. Both of us came down with dysentery. My cousin dies in my arm the night of liberation of dysentery. Poor guy, I think he was staying alive only because he wanted me to live. And now that he figured I'm liberated, it was okay for him to die. I couldn't believe it. And then they took him away from me. I followed, where are you taking him? And my knees gave out from under me and I fall. They pushed me to a wall. I lay there for 2 hours. One man walks up to me, nicely dressed, and he asked me in a broken German how many languages I speak. I told him. He says, Polish? I am from Poland. I'm a Polish Jesuit priest. I came here with nuns and doctors from Paris, and we're opening up a field hospital. I'll take you into the field hospital. At that point, I was 16 and a half. He picked me up like a sack of bones, and maybe I weighed 30 or 40 pounds. I don't know. I was as skinny as you can imagine. And he takes me to the infirmary, and nun comes out, takes my vitals, puts me on a cot with a white sheet, and Ben Lesser passes out. 5 weeks later, I wake up in a monastery called Santa Tillian, a beautiful place. Santa Tillian, there. The monks gave up one building to create a hospital for the survivors. And this is where I was born, in Santa Tillian. 5 weeks I was in coma. Can you imagine? I beg you, and if you didn't read my book, because what you heard is just a small portion of my story. How I met my only sisters who survived. We were in the same room for 2 hours. And neither one of us knowing, 3 feet apart, neither one of us knowing the other survived. And I left, and I'm going to Palestine at that time, because I felt I became a, they called this a, got the name. I became I believed that if the Jewish people had a land of their own, this would have never happened. If we had a country of our own. And Palestine is where the Jewish people were dispersed of when the Romans won the war. And the Jewish people were dispersed into the whole world, all over the world. Maybe that's how we wound up in Poland. But if we had our own country, the Holocaust would have never happened. And I became a pioneer. It's a whole story. And the beauty in the story is how I survived all of this. And I made a beautiful life for myself and my family. And I started the Dachau Holocaust Remembrance Foundation. You see, there were 4 of us starting a new family. My sister, a little boy. I found out she was pregnant. And her husband and I. So now we were 4 in the family of hundreds. We were only the 4. And this is how it started. Find out how my family, the beautiful family, my sister has a beautiful family. And life began again. You have to read the story. How it was possible? You're looking at the man who was on Skid Row, on Main Street on Skid Row, didn't have enough money to pay a hotel $1 a night, didn't have enough money to buy a cup of coffee. And he made a beautiful life for himself. It's all magic, and I feel that God led me. He led me to become successful, and thanks God He gave me a decent age so I can keep talking about it. The world would love to forget it. I won't let them, not as long as I'm alive. Any questions?
All right, so we got with you.
Okay, so you were talking about the family, and this first question is, how many family members do you have now, like in your extended family?
About 22, and it started just with me. But my sister is Orthodox Jewish. And of course, Orthodox people don't believe in birth control. So her family numbers about 200 now from my sister.
All right. And then you talked about coming to America. So you said that you didn't have a lot of money. So what was like your first job when you came to America?
My first job was upholstery. I never knew how to hold a hammer. Spit nail. Those days they didn't have magnetic hammers, magnets. So it was all by mouth. You had a bunch of tags and a magnetic hammer, and they would go like real fast. You had to be real good. How I became an upholsterer is everything is a miracle. It's unbelievable how I feel God led me to succeed in life. It was only, there's no other word. Because everything in my life was a miracle. Everything, my jobs, my business, everything was a miracle.
So you talked a lot about, where was God? So
Yeah. I was asking when I saw them throwing these children and people into fiery pits, where is God? And I lost my faith completely. But recently, I changed my feeling. You see, I figured this out. God gave us all free will. We can decide what we want to be in life. If we humans want to kill other people, God can't interfere because He gave us free will. This is how I gained my belief back again. It's the only answer I could find to what happened during the Holocaust. 6 million of our Jewish people were slaughtered by the Nazis, and 1.5 million of whom were children. Why? Because Hitler didn't like Jewish people. If you were born to a Jewish man, you were doomed for death. Jewish woman. That's just doesn't even make sense. Doesn't make sense. You don't know what I am doing. I am involved. You see this? This is the highest award you can receive from Germany. And I got this award for the Zachor Holocaust Remembrance Foundation. I keep this world reminding them. And I got a reward, the highest reward, from the Chancellor. So, almost everything that happened, and what I'm doing now, I am working, that professor that called me, he produced from my story a 61-page little short book. And he gave it out, he duplicated them, and he gave it out to school kids, high school kids. Well, the Bavarian government, Bavaria, saw that they liked this book so much They printed up thousands of them, and they gave it out free to each high school kid in Germany. I'm now working with the Chancellor of Germany to see if that same book cannot be printed for all of Germany. Every German high school kid should get one of these books. It tells my story during the Holocaust only. Nothing about America, nothing. Just the Holocaust story. And it also tells a story what happened in that town in Nemmering. In that town, my train said I wasn't at that train. I didn't know that. In his town, this professor in his town, the Nazis needed 10 cattle cars. They needed 10 cattle cars for whatever reason. And we were standing in his town for 2 days and 3 nights. I didn't know that. To me, day or night, it moved, the train was moving, stopping. We found out that the Nazis needed 10 cattle cars. So they emptied out the last 10 cattle cars from my train. 780 some odd people were all shot in that town. And they threw the bodies into a ditch. 3 weeks later, Eisenhower liberates that community. And he sees those bodies. And he found out what happened. He got very angry. He made every member in that town, including children from the age of 12, to come, pull out these bodies, clean them up, put ropes on each body, put a separate casket, and each body was buried in a separate casket in a big park nearby, and they enclosed it now. And the whole town had to see that. They had to go by these dead people and see. That was the same train that I was in. Lucky for me, I must have been in the 11th or 12th cattle car instead of the 10th. Unbelievable.
So one last question. What is it that we can do to make sure something like this doesn't happen again?
Yes, to make sure it doesn't happen, we have to stop the hatred. Remember, Hitler and the Nazis did not start with killing. It all started with hate. Hate, propaganda. This is how it began. So the hatred has to stop. Remember, love and hate are both contagious, so choose love. This goes for anything. We are all God's creation. Why can't we live side by side and appreciate our differences rather than hate them? Maybe you learn something from each other. Hate, there's no room for that. This is how it starts, with hate. And it's happening now. It's happening now. There's anti-Semitism all over the United States, all over the world. But the United States, of all the places, this is the land of the free. There's some Nazis, and because it's so easy on the computers to spew all the hatred, and high school kids don't know the difference, they pick it up, they find out, and they just started to hate. Because they find out. They find out that hate on thy neighbors, hate other religions. Why? We're all God's creation. We all should have the right to live side by side and appreciate our differences. I can't understand it. We need people like you to know, to hear me, to know what hatred did.
And you want to talk a little bit, I put up your foundation.
Zachor. Zachor means remember in Hebrew. That little pin says Zachor, that means remember. Remember the Holocaust. Remember what happened to the Holocaust. Remember what hate will do. And if you get on my website, we didn't stop that. You have no idea how much I'm doing to the website. I started on the website a I Shout Out program. You can all shout out on my website. Shout out for love, anything you want, for peace, for love. Your shout out will remain on the website for generations to come. And if you want to put a photograph of yourself, your photograph with your shout out is going to come out generations later. Zachor, that means remember, that little pin. And if you wear it, somebody's going to ask you what it means. Tell them. Remember the Holocaust. Remember what hatred is going to do. Hatred has to stop. This is a loving country. In Germany, the hatred is starting again. This is why I'm working so hard to give out these booklets to every student. You can't allow this to repeat itself.
Thank you, Ben, so much for coming. We do have his books, and we also have it on CD. Jonathan Silverman reads